Kentucky Outlook continues. And of course, don't forget about social media. You can check out our Facebook page and, of course, our YouTube channel where you can find archived editions of the show. Right now, like I say, we keep it moving on this show. We're now going to talk about sinkholes. So in the first segment, you met the Ombudsman for New Zealand, and now we're going to talk about sinkholes, right? Life's interesting, isn't it? But when you live in this area, when you live in this karst terrain, sinkholes are a real issue. Dr. Michael May joins us. He's with WKU's Department of Geography and Geology. And if you tune into the show on a regular basis, you were here right after the sinkhole happened at the Corvette Museum. And matter of fact, you were one of the first people on site when that sinkhole happened at the Corvette Museum. And if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, it was back in February.
Right.
And 8 valuable, priceless cars were swallowed up in a sinkhole, and we've got a picture of that. So if we could go, Scott, to that picture and take a look at that. And basically, the earth opened up at that place, didn't it?
Yeah, we have, they're going to fill this in a couple weeks, and I think it was determined that it's better to fill it in. It has been a boost to tourism. I think they had about 50%
Inquiring minds wanting to see that sinkhole.
But we just remind people that it's a lot about drainage, and some of these things happen apparently overnight, but not really. It's a long-term thing. Like the outside of the museum here, you can see where you have gravel or aggregate on the ground, and if you go to the next picture, you'll see inside that the Corvette Museum, you know, we had the soil, we call it soil piping, and it went way down, and sometimes things seem pretty solid until obviously there's a void that migrated upward from the subterranean system, and everyone knows about that famous viral video showing the cars plunging to their new position.
Their new position, that's putting it mildly. And yeah, that viral video actually showed the incident happening, and it didn't take very long. Right. But we'll talk a little bit about this in a bit, the shale well. But help people understand, when I reference the word karst, when I mention that term to people who don't live in Kentucky, K-A-R-S-T, what are you talking about? Basically, it means that we are built on caves?
That's right. Actually, I had the opportunity just this past weekend. It was the National Association of Women in Construction convention right here in Bowling Green. It was at the Sloan Convention Center, and so I asked that question of the audience, and there were women who were from Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky, and 5 people raised their hand out of a whole ballroom full of people, and I said, well, we have a good audience because a lot of people don't know what karst is, you know, disappearing streams, sinkholes, water that goes down and then comes up elsewhere. That would be your spring situation. But we also have soil that goes the way of the water, and so that the Corvette Museum is no exception. And so if we are not real careful about our drainage, it just takes time, and sometimes in less than a lifetime, and then we have these massive opening up of, you know, these karst systems, and then there's always the repair bill. So, you know, I think that's what people are toying with now. They have been at the museum. It's been kind of a big, you know, boost for the tourism, but, you know, it comes down to I suppose, do you want to maintain a plexiglass area where people can peer down into that? But, you know, it's certainly part of the Corvette Museum, and just like all the other places in town here, Dishman Lane back in 2002, that was another situation where we basically had soil going down the drain with the water, and a lot of our utility trenches, we did a show back in April, Matt Detman and I with you, and you can see that a lot of times the water will follow along these utility trenches, and you might think the water in the pipe is still running after the collapse, but it's actually the water running on the outside of the pipe in the backfill gravel or aggregate. And
then boom.
And then, you know, it just keeps loading in there, and then the next thing you know, a drought or a rainy period, that's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, and that's what you have. So.
But the big question is, living on this karst terrain, living on caves, and with the threat of sinkholes always there, is there a good way to determine when there's a perfect storm, if you will, when those kind of things are going to happen?
Yes, we can actually see, in some cases, there are monitoring devices where you can actually see the land slumping or little parts of the soil subsiding are going down. But it really comes back to, as far as residential areas, is the idea that you can control the drainage at your building site during building and most certainly after. And a lot of these things are kind of out of sight, out of mind. So one of the telltale signs, and you can see it walking up and down a sidewalk in Bowling Green. Yes, there's signs everywhere. You know?
Yeah, really, if you pay attention.
Yeah,
and know
I think
what to
there's a
look
song
for.
about that.
Yeah,
you know, signs, signs everywhere, signs. And it is true, but most people don't ponder that. You know, I'll give you a real good example. If you walked along a sidewalk, you'll see a so-called manhole cover or manway cover where there might be a sewer lid or stormwater or something like that. And you will notice that every one of those is offset a little different than the rest of the sidewalk.
Okay.
And that's because when they drilled the vertical hole downward, they were letting water go down there, but the water isn't just inside, or they're protecting it from the inside of this pipe if it was something electronic or something like that. But the water is going to go funnel down along that pipe, and so as the water goes, so does the soil go. And if you can't keep that soil up, it's going to go with the water and find its way down in every little nook and cranny in the karst system or the caves, and then you get a subsidence of the sidewalk around it. So they're always, you can see it on the Western Campus. It's everywhere. Go up Avenue of Champions. You can see where they have sawed off the edges of, or kind of sanded them down to make them flush or level, because the sidewalks are always moving. And so literally every sidewalk in Bowling Green for less than half a mile stretch, I guarantee you will find these features. It's due to the subsidence associated with what we call soil piping in the karst system. And you don't need a big gaping cave. There's just every little crack. If muddy water can go down through this, it can remove that soil, and through time, many times over decades, then it's just gone and you can't get it back.
Ooh, now, okay, I can see our viewers going, oh my gosh, should I be worried about the fact that my property, maybe my business or the place where I live, could one day be swallowed up in a sinkhole? Is that a realistic, legitimate fear to have in these
I don't
parts?
think it's a legitimate fear that you're going to wake up some morning and you're going to have a Corvette Museum situation or a Dishman Lane in your swing pool. But it is more common now for us to take notice of these things. It is more common for questions like, hey, are these happening more often? It's just that our footprint of building is increasing, as many people have noticed. Bowling Green, as an example, has grown tremendously. I've been here 18 years, and we've seen 15, 20,000 more people in the city. And so you're just going to encounter this. And the other thing is a lot of times you encounter these things and they're not necessarily newsworthy, or do people want you to know about it because they were developing a big box store or something like that. It's a construction site. It's not a finished product. So what, we go in and we know how to repair these things as we encounter them. But that's another thing. If people do build here, it's like this convention with the Women in Construction National Association. One of the things I stress to them is that you have to have a contingency cost when you're dealing with this, because if you go in and you're from Dallas or Atlanta and then you ask the contractor, have you heard of karst? And they say, what is a karst? Like it's a beast. Well, it is. And it's a stealthy geohazard is what we call them. Stealthy
geohazard. See the things you learn on this program? But it is, but it's something that you have to build in as a contingency.
Right. So 20 or 30% it may cost you, and it's kind of like pay now or pay later. If you're not really aware of these drainage problems and how you can get soil piping, you're going to end up paying for it later. Corvette Museum is a good example.
It's a very good example. We're quickly running out of time. We want to talk a little bit about oil exploration in these parts. It's active. It's
yes,
happening.
It is. And actually, I can make a tie between karst and some of the oil prospecting that's going on in the area. We have a whole new technology in the oil patch, and Kentucky is no different. We're beginning to have horizontal wells drilled, which means we go down and we find a geologic stratum layer that goes continuously.
I think we have a picture of
if we can go to that one with the horizontal well being drilled, and can show you a few here.
But so this is something new?
It's not all that new. It's about 20 years old. There's another thing that's out there. People are concerned about fracking or fracturing. We have ways of going through the subsurface, and we can case off all of the groundwater. And so karst has a groundwater resource component. We're concerned about that. So all of the oil wells, you know, we've been doing fracture jobs since 1947. But one of the big things happening in Kentucky, I think this graphic that we have up right now, if you can show this one, this shows some older geologic formations, and this is kind of a cartoon that shows kind of a vertical pipe there. It's a fracture zone, a karst collapse, an ancient karst collapse system. And a lot of these mumbled, jumbled pieces of rock, the technical term for it is breccia, which is basically like a whole bunch of broken plates, but it's like limestone.
Okay.
And the oil is in there, and if we can find one of these vertical pipes or chimneys, we can drill down through it, and if we know where it goes sideways, we can follow it with the drill bit and make very large producing oil wells. And
well, there was a headline, and we have a copy of that headline, where at one point in Kentucky they drilled 100,000 barrels?
yes, this was in 1990. This was called the Ferguson well, and this was if you think of a golf course, a fairway, there were 12 wells that were drilled, and there was over 1 million barrels of oil that came out of that approximately. And this headline is in an oil and gas journal. It says Kentucky well yields 100,000 barrels of oil in 5 weeks. Well, if you take $100 a barrel, or even 75 times 100,000 for a month, that's a nice paycheck.
That's a nice paycheck and lots of zeros.
Right.
And so interesting to see how that develops along with the karst terrain, and we hope we can get you back here to explain more of these things
It's
as
a
we
big
go.
thing right now.
It is, and it's continuing to do so. We've been talking with Dr. Michael May of WKU's Geography and Geology Department, and when Kentucky Outlook continues, we're going to meet author David Bell and find out about his new book, The Forgotten Girl. Don't go away.